one thing I wanted to bring up on this episode, which I don't think has gotten enough attention, is the relentless attack on the trans community that we've seen in the last few years. I mean, it's been ongoing for quite a while, but this just completely uh, unjustified and completely unprovoked attack on trans people in the military, trans people, in their passports. I mean, what the State Department has done just to be cruel. Hello, everybody. I'm Duke Mason, and welcome to this episode of Duke's Download. Today's episode is a milestone. We have now officially hit the point where 90% of podcasts don't even get. So I am so grateful to all of you for your support. We've been at this for just a few months. So again, just couldn't be more grateful to all of you for the support that you've shown me. And I couldn't be more thrilled about the feedback and the response that we've gotten since we started. So thank you all. I thought I'd do another Duke's Download Ask Duke Anything episode today because April is actually a very special month for me. It's been a very busy few weeks. For those of you who don't know, I joined Matt Mahan's campaign for governor of California at the end of last month. I'm an LGBTQ focused advisor and liaison, and I'm also helping with outreach in Southern California. So that's kept me pretty busy. In addition to that, and this is the first topic I wanted to cover today. We're going to do a little mix of both Ask Duke Anything, questions that you guys have asked me, and also just topics that I wanted to address and that are near and dear to my heart. The first of which is that April 13th was actually my boyfriend Army and I's 1-year anniversary. And those of you who watched the last Ask Duke Anything episode may remember that he and I did the video together. He actually asked me all the questions, and that was a really fun time. But April 13th was our 1-year anniversary. Army and I actually met back in 2010. So we've known each other a long time. But we only started dating in February of last year, and then we made it official at Coachella last year, which I know is so cliche, but I invited him to come with me last year. My mom's band, the Go-Go's, was performing, so I invited him to be my plus one for that. And that is where we decided to make things Facebook official. So, which I can't believe. I know it's not even a thing anymore, but we did. And so on April 13th, despite all the stuff going on with the campaign, we had a nice anniversary dinner, and it was a really good time. And then soon after that, my parents came into town. They actually were in Asia on a cruise because it was their 40th wedding anniversary on April 12th. So just by pure happenstance, our anniversaries are actually one day apart. And they were on a trip to Asia. They came back. They've actually been here now for a few days. And the other night we had a early birthday celebration for me because my 34th birthday is coming up on April 27th, and they're not going to be here. So they wanted to celebrate with me early. So between our anniversary, Army and I's anniversary, and my birthday, there's a lot going on in the month of April. And I just feel so grateful for all of you, for all the amazing things that are happening in my life. I thought I would talk a little bit about why I joined Matt Mahan's campaign for governor and why I really believe to my core that he is the best candidate to be the next governor of California. Those of you who know me, who've been watching me, who've been reading my articles, who've been following me, since I first started getting involved in activism and politics when I was, 16 or 17 years old. I was a page in Congress when I was 16. I started writing articles when I was 17. I wrote my first article for a now defunct, but at the time very widely distributed gay magazine in LA called Frontiers. And so I've been at this for a long time. And those of you who know me know how deeply I feel and how strongly I feel about supporting not just LGBTQ rights, but also the progressive agenda. And the reason why I am supporting Matt Mahan, I actually endorsed him right when he first announced his campaign back in January, um, but only got involved in an official capacity it's coming up on a month now. But the reason I decided to support him is because I feel in our politics today that there's an overemphasis on performative politics, on performative progressivism, as opposed to actually achieving progressive results. I think in politics in general, it's become a lot more about theater and about looking good or saying the right things, as opposed to actually delivering on progressive priorities. And one thing Matt has talked about and made sort of the centerpiece of his campaign is that the best resistance to Donald Trump and proving that progressive policies and progressive politicians and elected officials actually have what it takes to create real progress and change is by focusing on solutions and focusing on measurable outcomes. And that's something that Matt Mahan has done as the Democratic mayor of San Jose over the last 3 or 4 years. In just less than a 1 year term, he's cut crime by a third. San Jose is now the safest big city in America. It's actually, I think, one of the only cities in the whole country that has solved homicides 4 years in a row and counting, all homicides. He's cut homelessness by 1/3 in just 3 years. Um, the government there is efficiently run. Instead of saying, let's just, raise taxes on people, they're actually delivering on the money that's already there, on making sure the money that's already been raised by taxpayers is actually spent effectively and efficiently. And I think that's the kind of leadership that we need in Sacramento right now. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of areas on which, I'm a fan of Gavin Newsom. I've always said that no matter what, I will always be grateful to him for what he did in 2004 when he stood up and married same-sex couples, even at a time when that was not only, legally a very up in the air question, but also politically. People forget that in 2004, for all the people who say Gavin Newsom is, self-serving politician, the guy went out on a limb. There's no other way you can look at it. The guy really put his career on the line. It wouldn't be for another 10 years until things would change in terms of the issue of same-sex marriage. It really took a lot for him to do that. So on that issue alone, I will always be grateful to him. And I think that demonstrated a lot of courage. Having said that, I think all of us, if we're being honest, would agree that California has its share of issues, as any state does. But, we do have an issue with homelessness. We do have an issue with crime. We do have an issue with rising costs and affordability in general, but housing affordability specifically. And I think that Matt has a really important point when he says that if we want the rest of the country to follow our lead and to elect Democrats and implement progressive policies, then we need to prove that those policies work. And he's all about, rather than performance, rather than saying all the right things, he's about actually achieving progressive outcomes. And he's done that. I think he's, models the same kind of leadership that we see in San Francisco. The mayor of San Francisco, Daniel Lurie, just in a very short time in office, we've seen a massive amount of positive changes happening in San Francisco. I think we need to elect more common sense, pragmatic progressives, and who actually know how to achieve change, who've done it already in the past. And so that's why I joined Matt's campaign. And, I encourage all of you who live in California who haven't heard about him or his campaign or our campaign thus far. I hope you'll all go to mahanforcalifornia.com, look up his policies. I think you'll be impressed. And I think it's a very fluid race. Obviously, given what happened with Eric Swalwell a couple weeks ago, when we saw a lot of these horrific allegations drop relating to his behavior with women, the race is wide open. We actually have a debate happening tonight, which will be televised. And then the big debate that's coming up nationally, it'll be on national television, will be on CNN on May 5th. prime time. So I hope all of you tune in for that. The ballots drop on May 4th, and I'm, spending a lot of time the next couple weeks just doing everything I can to make sure that Matt makes it into the runoff on June 2nd. And beyond that, hopefully we'll make him the next governor of California. So I hope you'll all, those of you who live in our state, in the Golden State, will join our movement. And couldn't be more passionate and believe in Matt any more strongly. So thank you for that. Thank you for your consideration. I decided to give our watchers and listeners the opportunity to ask some questions. On a totally different note, moving on from politics, at least for now, Brandon Davis, who's a friend, and I've been on his podcast, Front Row Classics, which is an entertainment-focused podcast. He asked about what my favorite rainy day movie is, but since we're moving into spring and summer, I figured I'd broaden it a little bit and talk about my favorite movies in general. I have very eclectic taste in movies, so I just want to make that clear from the get-go. And I'm not someone that's necessarily, don't get me wrong, I love like great movies, like, movies that aren't necessarily commercially inclined, but that, are just artistically and creatively compelling. I love, I just saw, even though it was a hardcore movie to watch a few weeks ago, I saw Platoon, which, was a movie I'd never seen. Oliver Stone, Charlie Sheen was in it. Not exactly, an entertaining movie to watch, but just an unbelievable movie about the costs of war and, especially given what's going on in Iran right now. I think it's a timely, pertinent film. But, I also love new queer cinema. Greg Araki is one of my favorite directors. Mysterious Skin, another movie that's not easy to watch, but that's just an unbelievable, masterpiece. And a lot of his other movies too, even like the more obscure ones, like Living End and Nowhere. And so those are like those are pretty, those are pretty. Fringe might be the wrong word, but just not necessarily commercially inclined or inclusive, commercially geared films. I also love movies I love movies from the 80s, like To Live and Die in LA, which my dad said I should watch, which I had never seen before. William Friedkin, who's an amazing director. I saw that movie a few months ago and I loved it. And I actually want to show my boyfriend. Now again, not an easy movie to watch. But it's amazing. And I encourage all of you who haven't seen it to see it. It's a perfect encapsulation of LA in the 80s, the soundtrack, the vibe. It's just really, really cool. On the total other end, even though it's still in the 80s, but it's just like, from sort of more art housey movies to the more commercial, I'd say Terminator and Terminator 2 are my two favorite movies ever. Modern cinema anyway. Arnold Schwarzenegger is, maybe not my favorite actor, but certainly my favorite movie star, other than my grandfather. But I've always looked up to Arnold, and he definitely played a role, even though we have different views politically. He definitely played a role in my interest in politics, and when I was young, and seeing him run for governor, and Terminator 2 is what I think was probably the greatest action movie ever made. And, the effects were way ahead of their time. I just think that movie, it's just impossible to beat. Terminator 1 is great too. Back to the Future is another favorite of mine. And actually my parents, as an early birthday present, got me a original. I have it in here, but I haven't, I could take it out, but it's a little fragile. I have to get it framed. My parents actually got me an original Back to the Future poster from Japan, which is really, really cool. And from the original release, I'm going to get that framed for my bedroom wall. But yeah, Back to the Future, Terminator, Terminator 2. I also love, rom-coms. And, I have pretty eclectic taste in movies. I also love, like, when it comes to comedy, I love Christopher Guest, like Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show. And it was amazing when Catherine O'Hara passed away. bless her. I actually was on YouTube and I found an original YouTube clip of Catherine O'Hara doing an impersonation of my grandfather on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. This was right after she passed away. And my mom and dad and I had been huge fans of hers for forever. So to find that was super surreal. And yeah, when it comes to TV too, like I have very eclectic taste. I loved Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I watched growing up with my dad. That show has played such a gigantic role in terms of my personal sense of humor, my sort of shorthand with my dad and with some of my friends. Um, Also, of course, Heated Rivalry comes to mind as being one of my favorite shows that I've seen recently. Just because it's rare to find a show that has that kind of just unabashed, like real, unfiltered, uncensored gay representation, and it's also in such a mainstream sort of commercial way. I mean, that show has just taken over the world culturally, not just within the gay community. And also, my friend Greg Cope White produced and wrote Boots, which Boots is another example of a show that captured the zeitgeist when it came out, and I just so wish there were a second season happening, but I absolutely loved it. And I think another example of like a gay themed show in the military, another hockey and Heated Rivalry, the military and Boots, LGBTQ representation in an area where you don't often see it, I think is really important. So anyway, I mean, I could go on and on, but I have very eclectic taste in movies and TV. I mean, there's just so much content out there, good content these days, especially in TV, where you can only watch so much. But with everything else going on, I try to keep up with a few shows and movies at least. Um, I'm going to read this question because it was very specifically worded. But my friend Elizabeth Bond asked, which I think is a really interesting question. She said, I know you are very passionately pro America, but having grown up in Europe, do you think some things in America are better or worse? She lives in Germany, I believe. So I want to make that point. Healthcare, safety, gay rights. Could America benefit from implementing any European policies? So this is an interesting question because when I grew up in Europe, I spent most of my childhood living in France and the UK, from like when I was 2 until I was 18. So I spent 16 years living in Europe. I would come back here a lot, but as a kid, I spent most of my time living in France, most of the time in France, a few years in London. Um, when I was a kid, I was very, I think it's always also a question of like, you want what you don't have. So when I was a kid, all I wanted was to be in America. Like that was like every day I woke up saying, when I turn 18, I'm going to move back to the States. And sure enough, that's exactly what I did. Literally the morning after my high school graduation, I got on a plane and I came back to America, to California and LA specifically. I knew that LA was where I belonged. And I think that's part of why I loved movies like Terminator and Back to the Future, was I had this, in a way, like an immigrant's point of view, the way that people look at America as being this bigger than life place where anything is possible. Uh, and that's really the way that I felt about America, that I still do feel about America. I remember on that show, The Newsroom, I don't know how many of you remember it, but I remember seeing a clip from it back probably in like 2014. Um, and I remember there was a scene where Jeff Daniels says, America is not the greatest country in the world anymore. And at the time, I remember being super, like, for some reason, super, no, maybe not offended, but certainly like struck by that comment. I was like, how dare he say that? And obviously that question has gotten slightly more complicated in the last 10 or 11 years or 12 years now. Um, I still believe America is the greatest country in the world. I think it's unique. And I think, take it from the immigrants who still, despite all the reasons that we've given the world, and immigrants, all the reasons we've given them to feel negatively about America in recent years, they still say that. There's still, a sense globally, despite our government, despite our president, that America is the land of opportunity. But I definitely think that we have done a lot the last decade to chip away at that notion and at that idea. I think those two things can be true at once. I think there's a lack of nuance in our public discourse these days. And I think it's possible to both acknowledge America's strengths, but also talk about our weaknesses. I think part of what makes America such a great nation is that we have had struggles in the past and that we've overcome them. I mean, that's part of what makes America so special is that, in the past, whether it was with, I'll use the example of gay rights, um, for the longest time until very recently, gay marriage was not legal. Gay people were not allowed to serve in the federal government openly. They weren't allowed to serve in the military openly. Gay sex was illegal in many states, technically anyway, until 2003, until 23 years ago. But we have overcome most, not all, of those struggles. And I think that applies, in many ways to women's rights, to civil rights, to labor rights, to, immigrants, the Chicano movement. I mean, I think the story of America and its greatness is that I think we are great because of our ability to overcome our struggles. And I think the problem is, I think now these days everybody's so siloed, where it's like, I mean, if you think America's got issues, then you're evil. And then there's the other side that thinks that if you acknowledge any of America's positive attributes, then you're evil, and you're ignoring all the problems and the mistakes we've made in the past. Obviously, there are many of them. But for me, that's not a complicated. It's not a complicated concept to hold those two things to be true at the same time. In terms of European policies, obviously, I think America's backtracked in a lot of areas. One thing I wanted to bring up on this episode, which I don't think has gotten enough attention, is the relentless attack on the trans community that we've seen in the last few years. I mean, it's been ongoing for quite a while, but this just completely unjustified and completely unprovoked attack on trans people in the military, trans people, and their passports. I mean, what the State Department has done just to be cruel, taking away people, transgender Americans' ability to identify as they are on their passports. What we see on a state by state basis in Kansas, the state banning transgender Kansans from access to identify themselves on their driver's licenses. Obviously, that's an area where I feel like our country has this weird obsession with this issue, dating back to the whole transgender people in bathrooms issue from back in 2016. It's like we have so many challenges as a country, and the fact that we're talking about something that to me seems completely obvious, that people should have the ability to identify themselves as they are, and that this is not something we should even be debating. But obviously, this is an issue that's been amplified by the right in this country and used just as they used gay marriage back in 2004. George W. Bush used the federal marriage amendment, or proposed federal marriage amendment, as a cudgel and as a wedge issue to try to divide people. So I think Europe, at least overall, seems to be a little more ahead of the curve on that issue. On other issues too, I think there's a demonization of immigrants in this country these days. When I grew up in France, I went to a school where we had 33 different nationalities. And so I was never afraid or, felt uncomfortable with the idea of having people from different walks of life. And I think Europe, in a lot of ways, is ahead on that too. Whether it's France or England or I mean, look, every country has issues when it comes to migration, and that's just the reality. We live in a world where everybody, to some extent, is interconnected now, and there's geopolitical conflicts that cause mass migration. I mean, there's always going to be issues relating to that, but I think you see what's happened in countries like the Netherlands, where they just elected this first openly gay prime minister, 38 years old, pro-immigration, with smart, and reasonable restrictions. But, there isn't this like obsession with, immigrants are destroying everything or transgender people are destroying everything. I think there's like this country, it seems, I think because of the media and social media and because of conservative media, there's like this, it's in the same way that back in the 2000s, I remember watching American TV from France. It was like I'd watch Fox News and you'd see, terror alert every morning, terror level, threat level. And it's the same kind of thing. It's just keeping people in a constant state of fear. Uh, I think the only strategy that the right has and has always ever had is just to constantly barrage people and tell them that their problems are caused by immigrants or trans people or gay people or feminists or whatever. It's just like this. It's really the same strategy. And so I think you're even look at England, even Italy, where they have a conservative prime minister. They have been uniformly supportive of Ukraine. I think Europe, is sort of uniformly supportive of Ukraine because they see the stakes, very up close and personal of what would happen if Ukraine were to fall and Russia were to win that conflict. So I think in that sense as well, Europe has a sort of clear-eyed view about the stakes of that conflict. And on a personal level, I've spoken out about the issue of Russia and Ukraine and Chechnya, and Russia and Chechnya's crackdown on LGBTQ plus rights for a long time now. And I think that right there sort of exemplifies, um, if you want to know, if you want a perfect demonstration of the gap between Russia and Ukraine, just use the issue of gay rights because Ukraine has openly gay service members, is a culturally and politically and legally pro-gay country, and pro-human rights country across the board. Then look at Russia, where they're imprisoning gay people and even people who speak out in support of them. Chechnya, grabbing them in the middle of the night, into a van and torturing them and killing them, and not even allowing public discourse or even a public mention in schools or otherwise of gay issues. So, I think that right there, I think Europe has been sort of uniformly supportive of Ukraine and fought alongside it, while America, has just has doing, in my opinion, the last year and a half, a dismal embarrassment and disappointment on that issue. So there are definitely a bunch of areas, climate change, environmental protections, it's sort of like not even an issue and sort of an obvious like non-issue in Europe. America's totally dropped the ball on that. So there are a lot of, and with the Iran conflict too, in Europe, we see sort of people saying we're not going to sign on. Like we were to me, the biggest irony of this whole Iran conflict is that Trump ran on being the no more wars candidate. Like I remember living in Europe during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. I remember sitting in front of the TV and watching it and hearing all the Europeans in school, for lack of a better word, Essing, Shitting, on George W. Bush and saying how horrible America was for this war. And the fact that Trump is now basically doing exactly what Bush did, at least as of now, with the exception of the ground invasion, but in every other sense, doing exactly what Bush did. And for Europe is like, we are not doing this again. Like, we are, and I just find it incredible that America is heading down this path again. And the Iraq War is one of the reasons why I got involved in politics in the first place. I became passionate about politics was because I felt so strongly about the Iraq War and opposing it. So those are a bunch of areas where I think, obviously, healthcare. One that's the last thing. And gun safety too. I mean, the fact that America still. I just saw the news recently about yet another shooting. I forgot where it was, but I think it was somewhere in. Uh, I forgot exactly what city it was in, but yet I woke up and yet another like 8 people shot, 8 children shot. I mean, this is like a no non-issue in Europe when it comes to gun issues anyway. Of course, there's always going to be, the threat of violence in one way or another, but the gun issue specifically, we have mass shootings and mass attacks in a way that other countries do not have. And to me, the fact that that continues to be an issue in this country is just mind-boggling. And healthcare too. It's just incredible to me that that we still have relentless attacks on Obamacare. I think the healthcare issue has been not the healthcare in England or in Canada or in Canada's not Europe, but France or the fact. Of course, there are always government is not ever going to work perfectly, but I think we should at least strive to do the basic things that government is meant to be there for. Healthcare should not be something that people have to wake up in the middle of the night worrying about every single day. And to me, that the fact that we see the Republicans relentlessly trying to cut Medicaid and Medicare and trying to do away with the Affordable Care Act that gave tens of millions of people health care. It just, I don't even know what to say about it. It's just, I don't know to what end except to be cruel and to do away with Obama's legacy and to, it's just, I don't know why. It's a big reason why I'm a Democrat. I think healthcare is a basic human right and that everybody should have access to it. And so I think Europe in many ways has done a good job of removing the profit motive when it comes to healthcare. And one other issue I wanted to address, not related to Europe, I guess actually one other issue I wanted to address, which is more relevant here in the States, but I know there's been a discussion about it around the world, is the recent Supreme Court decision on conversion therapy here in the United States. This was an issue that I thought had been settled many years ago. Like, I'm old enough to remember in the mid 2000s when Time Magazine actually had a big piece. I forgot the name of the article, but there was a big piece. They had a young gay teenager on the cover of Time Magazine in 2006, and it was a whole discussion about the debate over conversion therapy and over the treatment of gay teens, and in the last 5 years or so, it seemed like that issue had finally been settled, like with a lot of other issues. Yet again, we're having this discussion, and it's pretty convoluted. I don't want to go into too much detail about the Supreme Court's decision itself, because they used a lot of excuses to come to the decision, and they tried to give the issue back to the lower courts. But what they basically did was they enabled the lower courts. I think there was a sort of excuse that involved the First Amendment and free speech. They said to the lower court that we want you, because there's a free speech element here that needs to be considered, we want you to incorporate that component and then make a decision. But inevitably, what's going to happen is they're going to reverse or the ban on conversion therapy, which to me is just mind-boggling, incredible, considering that it's been proven, I mean, time and time again, to not work. If anything, it's a big reason why for so many years we saw LGBTQ plus kids killing themselves at a vastly higher rate. We still do. But this is just going to lead, pure and simple, to more teenagers and youth killing themselves. And, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, as someone who grew up as a teenager, and who went to organizations like PFLAG, for support, and who understands intimately, how important it is to hear that affirmation from your friends, from your family. And if you don't have them, from the communities and from online resources, but to have, in 2026, to know that you're now going to have charlatans and frauds profiting off of telling kids that they are wrong and that, they're not hurting anybody else. To let these kids, all they want is affirmation, to be able to live their lives as they see fit, as they, based on their feelings, but their lived experience. And to me, the fact that the Supreme Court has now enabled fraudsters to take advantage of these children predators to profit off of their lack of acceptance is just unconscionable. And it's definitely, when I come back to that whole discussion about America and where we're at and, our positives, our negatives. I mean, that right there definitely made me feel a little less positive about where we're at as a country. But I think America's history is proof that we can get better, that we can do better. And while we've definitely seen a lot of regression in the last year and a half, really over the last 10 years, with a brief respite by the Biden administration. But, the last 10 years, I think we've seen a lot of darkness. But I think America's history is, full of darkness, but it's also full of a lot of light. And generally, at least as of now, we'll see how the next couple of years go with the midterms and with the presidential election. But I think generally, even in moments in the past where we've seen a regression during Reconstruction, after Reconstruction, and back in the 1870s and 80s, we saw a regression, and during, Jim Crow. And, there's definitely been periods where we've seen a backsliding, but generally we always eventually, even if it takes longer than it should, we always come back. And I'm really hoping that that's where this country goes in the next couple of years. I think we, as a progressive movement, have the wind at our backs. And I think we are going to move back in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that in the meantime, we're not going to see a lot of darkness and a lot of negativity. So it's a tough road ahead, but I feel optimistic. I am so grateful, as I said at the beginning of this episode, so grateful to all of you for your support. When we started this podcast, part of our goal was to bridge the divide between politics and pop culture. And I think we have done that because we've had a mix of different guests. We've had people who were, elected officials, politicians, but we've also talked to people who are athletes and musicians and, people who have made an impact outside of the political realm, but who have nonetheless helped to reverse some of this negativity and darkness that we've seen and are pushing things in the right direction. And that's really what I started this for, to try to talk to these people, to get information and lessons from them and knowledge about that we can all use as part of our efforts to try to make a positive change. And I think we've done that in a very short period of time. So I think we're going to see a lot of growth in the weeks and months and years to come. And I'm really enjoying the process. I'm grateful to all of you. I'm glad I could share this message before my birthday, which is coming up in a few days. It's a big one. I mean, it's weird to be getting up to 35 years old, especially when I first started. I was known when I started in activism as being like the young, the gaby, the young kid, being 18. I've now been at this for almost 17 years, which is kind of insane, since I wrote my first article in 2009. But it's been a good road, and I'm really looking forward to the future. I think the future is going to be even better and even bigger than ever before. So thank you all, and I will see you next week. We have a pretty cool episode coming next week, which I look forward to sharing with all of you. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me today on Duke's Download. This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by me, Duke Mason, and produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig. Original music composed by Nell Balaban. If If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It really helps others to discover the show. I'd love to stay connected with you, so join the conversation by following me at James Duke Mason on Instagram and X, or by emailing me at questions@dukesdownload.com.